Okay, so I've got my existing elements showing there in this demolition plan, and I have then those elements there that are to be demolished showing dash to indicate demolition. And so I'm going to rename this sheet and call it what it is, demolition plan. And actually a really good tip I can give you when you are working with lots of layouts, give them meaningful names, because you'll find before long with even small projects like this, you'll have lots of layout tabs down here. And it can get really confusing if they don't have clear names. So there I have this extra layout 2, and so that doesn't get in the way anymore, I'm just going to delete that. I don't need it. And now I'm going to duplicate this demolition plan by right-clicking on that layout tab and going to move or copy. I'm just going to choose move to end, tick create a copy, click OK, and I've got an exact duplicate. Okay, now, so then I can rename this page, just again by right-clicking, and we're going to call this proposed. So again, it's just going a bit slowly there. There we go. So proposed, P-R-O-P is okay. Alright, so I'm going to keep that same plan. I'm going to double click inside the viewport to make it active. And then I'm going to go down into my list of layers, and then you see I've got a demolition layer, and next to that you've got the option to freeze just in the current viewport. So what that means is if I go back to the other layout that shows my demolition plan, I can still see that layer, but on this new viewport, on this new tab, that layer's turned off. And so you can have different combinations turned on and off in different viewports. I'm also going to lock that scale using the padlock down here so that if I zoom, it's not going to change the view. I'm going to go back and do that in the demolition plan as well, just to make doubly sure that those two views are going to be identical, or in the same place on the page anyway. And so now I can go back to the layers there, and on the wall masonry layer, I'm just going to draw some lines for my walls, just to show you how the proposed or the new elements should be showing. So I'm going to draw in just the two new lines for the different sides of the brick. And then I'll go to my masonry hatch layer, draw a hatch using good old ANSI 32, and the scale I think will be about 10. Okay, so you can see there it's got some issues with pick points because I've got other elements there that it's detecting. Okay, so if that happens, what you can do is either draw in a polyline or even just select elements that are there. In this case, I don't need to draw a new polyline because I have lines going all the way around. So I'll just go back and show you. If I do hatch again now, ANSI 32, and I'm going to, instead of using pick points, use select, and then I can choose the 4 lines there. Oh, and someone's changed the options. Okay, so when you see this happening, it means there's someone without a lot of experience using AutoCAD on your computer. So what they've done is they've changed the selection option, so you need to use Shift to add to selection, which I find really annoying. So I'm going to change that back by right-clicking on the Command tab, on the Command panel, going to Options, and then if you go to the Selection tab there, you'll see there's an option to use Shift to add to selection. That option makes AutoCAD behave a bit more like other programs, but in a bad way. That's actually, I think, a really, or an option that slows you down. And again, we'll just go back and I'll show you why. So if I go back now and do hatch, and then select. Now I don't need to use shift when I want to select multiple objects, and with AutoCAD you will always or commonly need to select multiple objects. Okay, so there we are. So I've got my new hatch pattern. The scale there maybe could be a bit more depending on the scale of your drawing. So 25 maybe could be about right. You do need to guess sometimes with these hatch patterns what scale it's going to need. But I think actually, because it's 1 to 50, 10, 12, something like that might be about right. The reason that they have unusual numbers there is because they all do come from imperial. In other words, feet and inches. Okay, so you can see there that shows really clearly this is going to be a new wall. We have the same over here, so where the door is. So again, I can just draw lines in really quick and easy, and make sure they're on the right layer. And then again, when I hatch here, I'll try using pick points initially, and again, it's not working all that well, so instead I will go to select and just try selecting those lines, and even though this line here sticks out, that's working pretty well. You can, it's just a bit more confusing there because you're going to have the layers for the demolition and the new things showing. So there you can see I've got my demolition there. I could turn the demolition layer off, but if I turn it off, then it'll be off in the demolition plan. I don't want that. Now, what I need to do then though, you can see here in the demolition plan that I can see those new things that I've just drawn. So conversely, I need to freeze those layers in this viewport. So I've got my A wall masonry. We'll probably end up freezing nearly all of these layers for new things. So I could do that now in one step, but I'll just do it as I go so it's clear to you. So this is the wall masonry layer, this is the wall masonry hatch layer. So they can be frozen in this viewport. They're still on in this one. Okay, so another little thing, little tip I can give you there. The grids can make things a bit unclear in, especially in layout viewports, because you've got a white background. So you can just turn the grid option off on the toolbar down there. So I can do that in each viewport. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure these both zoom. So I'm just, as I go into each tab, I'm double clicking with the wheel so that you can see then these two plans are in exactly the same position. Unfortunately, the command line is hiding the things that I've just been working on, but you can see there maybe this area as I flick between them, it's really clear what the changes are. And that's a nice formatting thing to have. And so then maybe to go just a little bit further, to draw in your new elements, you need to make sure that you have the required layers. So you may need a layer for the internal walls. So do you know what the internal walls for your apartment are going to be made from? Stud, did you say? Yeah, exactly, stud walls. Yep, that's exactly what I call them. Yep, so stud. You don't even need to nominate the framing type. It'd probably be steel for a building like this, but it could be timber, and they'd be plasterboard lined generally. But what would be the other option? So you'd have exactly. Yeah, AquaCheck or just fibre cement. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Spot on. So, yep. So that's good. So you'd make a wall stud plasterboard, or just P board. and or even keep it simple, PB, and then you'll have another wall type or another layer for the wet areas. Okay, so the colour's up to you, and then the line weight. Okay, so I think we looked last week at how you can show the framing in plan. So do you remember how to find out about that? Your wall framing? So I've given you the catalogue in the Construction 2 folder. If you go to Resources, probably got one for interior design, one of your most important resources, just the gyprock catalogue. So make sure you're starting to read through that, and so you'll see in there it has all sorts of details showing how wall framing is put together. So let's look at these plan details which we've got in there. Okay, so is that how you think how you would show your walls in plan, do you think? Let's just go through a bit further. So looking at the details, you can see, again, just clicking through some of these, just trying to find some plan details. These are mostly sections there. No, they're all sections. I'm just going to go back to the plans that were in the earlier section. Here we are. Okay, so again, just make sure you know what you're looking at there. Okay, so these are details looking at the wall being cut through horizontally. In other words, they're plans, or most of them are anyway. And so that's what you would see if you cut through the wall in plan. But would you show that in your proposed drawings, do you think? Yeah, well, you could. You could actually do this. And I've done plenty of plans where I show this level of detail if I'm doing the project management myself, because I want to know exactly how it's going to be built. But for a project like this, you're just doing the minimum documentation required, and so you don't need to show all of that detail. You can do it in a simplified form, but then how would you indicate your stud framing? How would you specify what spacings are required, say, for this between the studs, if you're not going to show it in your drawings? Okay, so the other option is to do it by specification. So always remember, your drawings and your specification should be read together. They basically form one document. And so if you have the option of showing it by drawing, which is what you're seeing there, but the other option is just to do it by specification. Yeah, that's right. But look, you could show in your 1 to 50 floor plan, you could definitely show studs and they would come up pretty clearly. But yeah, all of the other detail there, definitely, 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, yeah. But again, you need to specify it somewhere. So if you're not going to show it in your plans, which I would probably recommend, it's too complicated to show all of this in your floor plan, make sure you show it in your specification or indicate it in your specification. Particularly things like shadow lines, that's where people get into trouble, just saying, I want a shadow line, but then not telling the builder how it needs to be done. Because a lot of them won't know, or they won't be very familiar with it, because it's not a standard detail. Shadow lines? So most designers these days want to do shadow lines at some point. So even a junction between a wall and a ceiling, you can have a shadow line. So that's a gap between the. So along the gap between the wall and the ceiling there, instead of having a cornice, you can have a gap essentially, So you get a shadow running along the top of the wall, and it's a much nicer junction than if you do what they've done here, which is just run the plaster right up. And you can see actually there's a, well, it's not cracking, but there's an obvious gap there, and it's uneven. It's just not a very professional looking junction.
And usually the shadow line coming from the sea.
No, the wall.
From the wall.
Yeah, yeah, and you can see the detail right there. So it's a special detail, and they need to get a special. There's a special product they need to use to get that junction, and so they need to know to obviously to go and buy that first, and then how to install it. And it's not the standard detail. Standard detail is to put a cornice in to cover up that junction. Okay, so you've got all of those things which can be done with your drawings or by specification. So you just need to put a note in your specification explaining how you want the things to be built. Okay, so going back to our drawing, all I need to do then for my walls is know the thickness of them and allow for this framing when necessary. And we're going to say we'll do some pretty a decent thickness for these walls. So I'll make it 90 mil, which is probably thicker than it would be in reality, but we'll just say it is that. So I can just draw lines, and I didn't check my line weight. Oh yes, sorry, 0.4. So that's plenty. I should be able to see that. Oh yep, it is there. So I just zoomed out, and then offset 90 mil. So, okay, and so then going back to the demolition plan, again, we can see that in the viewport there. So again, just to make it clear, this is the option you use to freeze in that viewport. The button next to it freezes in all viewports. I don't want that, and the button next to that is to turn on and off, but again, that works in all viewports, so I don't want that either. Okay, so on in this viewport, off in this one. That's really the main idea. Okay, so maybe we'll look at referencing afterwards, but start to think about how you can then set up your referencing to reference from this drawing to your sections and the other details you're going to need.